Asceticism. Asceticism is the severe self-discipline and avoidance of all forms of indulgence, typically for religious reasons. Asceticism austere in appearance, manner, or attitude. It is a lifestyle characterized by abstinence from sensual pleasures, often for the purpose of pursuing spiritual goals. Classification of asceticism. The principal asceticism operates in an inverse manner to that of utility, approving of actions in as far as they tend to diminish a person's happiness, disapproving of them in as far as they tend to augment it. It seems to represent a veritable anti-life force, but for several reasons, Bentham indicates its operation is curtailed and effects less awful than might first appear. As Manning notes, Bentham regarded any claims concerning the superior value of pain to pleasure to be sheer sophistry. One might call attention to his non-hedonistic sounding goal, such as finding truth, yet nonetheless be pursuing this goal because it gives him pleasure. Thus, the pain is so willingly endured by the saints and the sage are embraced for no other reason than the promise of heavenly reward and earthly praise. In Manning's world, the ascetic pursues only that pain which is necessary to his greatest happiness, and consequently he is a hedonist. Many appeals to asceticism, if not fully hypocritical, are thus for show.
In 19th century German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, he advocated a type of asceticism that annihilates the will to live. His fellow countryman and earlier contemporary, the philosopher Immanuel Kant, held to a moral asceticism for the cultivation of virtue according to the maxims of the Stoics. So, dahil po dito, maraming dahilan ang pagtaas, paglinang ng religious asceticism. Isa na rin po dito ang takot sa impluwensya ng mga demonyo sa atin. So, all of this include the realization of the transitory nature of earthly life.
Criticism of the theory asceticism. Scholars of religion have always been fascinated by asceticism. Some have even regarded this radical way of life, the withdrawal from the world, combined with practices that seriously affect basic bodily needs, up to extreme forms of self-mortification, as the ultimate form of a true religious quest. This view is written in hagiographic descriptions of prominent ascetics and in other literary accounts that praise the ascetic lifestyle. Scholars have often overlooked, however, that in the history of religious ascetic beliefs and practices have also been strongly criticized by followers of the same religious tradition as well as by outsiders. The respective sources provide sufficient evidence of such critical strands, but surprisingly, as yet no attempt has been made to analyze this criticism of asceticism systematically.
Benefits of the theory. Easier to become self-employed. If you reduce your living expenses to the bare minimum, you don't need to earn as much income to support yourself. Easier to pay rent, food, etc. Creative content. Even though you can afford more expensive things by opting to take the cheaper option, is a creative content. We learn how to be more creative with having shitter stuff. It is a more interesting challenge to make more with less, rather than having the best expensive tools to do something. Ultimate freedom. If you own fewer possessions, fewer things own you. We free spirit, desire, freedom, and control our lives more than happiness or pleasure. Thus, by living a more aesthetic lifestyle, by not needing to buy shit for happiness, we can be more joyful in our lives by being in more control ourselves, our time, and our lifestyle.
Application of asceticism on some issues. The first issue is about lying and cheating. Asceticism is the practice of the denial of physical or psychological desires in order to attain a spiritual ideal or goal. Asceticism indicates a type of behavior in which an individual submits his or her impulses, passions, and desire to a systematic way of life in order to achieve what he or she considers to be his or her elective nature and to which he or she feels called, which if applied would prevent them from lying and cheating. The second issue is about human sexuality. Asceticism is a spiritually oriented way of life that involves abstaining from sensual pleasures. Asceticism is a way of life marked by a lack of sensual pleasures, often with the intention of achieving spiritual goals. Bonds between persons that are conveyed through intense feelings or bodily manifestations of love, trust, and caring are physical and emotional components of sexuality. Applying asceticism, one should get rid of the worldly pleasures, and restraining oneself from indulging in bodily activities are widely experienced as giving pleasure. The practitioners of this philosophy abandon sensual pleasures and lead an abstinent lifestyle in the pursuit of redemption. The last issue is about breaking promises and stealing. Self-imposed constraints, ascetic laying, give them more freedom in various aspects of their lives, such as increase in clarity of thought and the ability to resist potentially destructive temptations.
In order to evaluate or make decisions about the theory of asceticism, you must prepare yourself into a severe self-discipline and avoidance to all forms of indulgence. By doing that, you will be able to decide wisely whether you will avoid or engage with that particular application or problem that you will face.
Questions to reflect on the theory. Can pleasure be quantified? Bentham attempts to quantify pleasures in the hedonistic calculus. Some of the factors are quantifiable, such as duration, certainty, and extent, but most of the factors are not quantifiable. There may well be different kinds of pleasures and threshold of pleasures. Propinquity can be established by indifference curves, but this would be an attempt to quantify feelings. What Bentham means by the principle of asceticism. The principle of asceticism is the inverse of the principle of utility. The principle is not consistently used because it opposes the natural influences of pleasure and pain. Why is asceticism significant? Asceticism indicates a type of behavior that tends to submit impulses, passions, and desires of an individual to a systematic way of life in order to achieve what he considers his elective nature and which he feels called to. What the Bible says about asceticism. Asceticism taught a person to lead a life of contemplation and rigorous self-denial and abstinence. As the church taught a proper enjoyment of life, the Christians at the Colossae stood out as being different. Some members still desired to be accepted by the world around them. Elements of an attitude of wanting outside acceptance have been evident recently in the church.